You're standing in line at the grocery store. Your phone is at 2%. There is nothing to look at, nothing to read, nothing to do. And within 11 seconds, your hand twitches toward your pocket anyway. You're not checking for messages. You're checking for an escape. This feeling has a name. Scientists call it boredom. But what if boredom isn't a small, harmless itch in your brain? What if it's one of the most dangerous feelings a human being can have? For most of history, nobody worried about boredom. It seemed too minor, too forgettable. But the deeper researchers looked, the stranger the picture became. In 2014, a psychologist named Timothy Wilson ran an experiment that should have been simple. He put people alone in a room, no phone, no book, no window, just a chair and their own thoughts for 15 minutes. That's it. Some of these rooms had one extra object, a button that delivered a mild electric shock if pressed. You'd think no one would press it. Why would you choose pain over silence? Almost 70% of people pressed the button anyway. Read that again. Given the choice between sitting quietly with their own mind or hurting themselves, most people chose the shock. Wilson didn't conclude that people are reckless. He concluded something darker. The human mind, left alone with nothing, doesn't relax. It searches for an exit. Any exit. Even a painful one. So why does an empty 15 minutes feel unbearable? To answer that, you have to go back further than psychology labs. You have to go back to the savannah. Your ancestors didn't experience boredom the way you do, but they experienced something close to its ancestor. Restlessness. A hunter-gatherer who sat still too long missed the moment prey wandered into range. A forager who stopped scanning the horizon missed the predator approaching from behind. Stillness, for most of human history, wasn't peaceful. It was risk. Your brain evolved a built-in alarm system to prevent you from sitting idle for too long, because idle bodies didn't survive. That alarm system never got the memo that the world changed. You no longer need to scan a savanna for lions. But the ancient circuitry firing in your skull doesn't know that. It still treats stillness as danger even when you're just standing in a grocery line. So it sends out a signal, and that signal is what you call boredom. It's not a void, it's an alarm. This is where a researcher named John Eastwood enters the story. Eastwood spent years studying boredom at York University, and he reached a conclusion that reframed the entire feeling. Boredom, he argued, isn't simply nothing happening. It's the unpleasant feeling of wanting to use your mind, but being unable to engage it with anything meaningful. Your brain isn't asleep when you're bored. It's wide awake, straining against an invisible leash, looking for somewhere to point itself. That's the part most people get wrong. Boredom doesn't feel like rest. It feels like friction, like an engine revving in neutral, and revving engines need somewhere to go. Here's where it gets stranger. A 2014 study tracked what people actually do the moment boredom strikes, and the results lined up with something darker than a simple desire for stimulation. Bored people don't seek pleasure. They seek movement, any movement, which is why so many of humanity's worst decisions, compulsive scrolling, impulsive spending, reckless driving, even self-harm in extreme cases, share a single root cause buried underneath them. An unbearable stillness the mind was trying to escape. Think about every time you've made a decision you regretted within minutes. Refreshing a feed you already checked. Sending a text you shouldn't have. Snapping at someone for no reason. Buying something you didn't need. Ask yourself honestly, were you bored right before you did it? You probably were. A psychologist named Erin Westgate took this idea even further. She proposed something called the meaning and attention theory of boredom. The idea that your mind isn't just looking for stimulation, it's looking for significance. You don't just want something to do, you want something that matters. When nothing around you feels meaningful, your attention has nowhere to land, and that mismatch is what produces the unbearable itch. This explains something you've probably noticed but never named: why scrolling never actually satisfies boredom. It distracts you for a moment, but the itch returns minutes later, sometimes worse. That's because scrolling gives your brain motion without meaning. It feeds the craving for stimulation while starving the craving for significance. You feel busier, but emptier, like eating food with no nutrients. So what happens when a person stays in that state for too long? Boredom that lingers doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It reshapes behavior. Long-term studies on chronic boredom have linked it to higher rates of impulsivity, risk-taking, and even depression. Prisoners in long-term solitary confinement with nothing to occupy their minds report psychological effects that mirror trauma. Soldiers in long, uneventful deployments are statistically more likely to take unnecessary risks the moment action becomes available, not despite the boredom, but because of it. Boredom, in other words, doesn't just make you uncomfortable. Left untreated, it can quietly rewire what you're willing to do to make it stop. But here's the twist almost nobody expects. Boredom isn't your enemy. It's a messenger. For thousands of years, that restless itch pushed your ancestors to leave the cave, explore the next valley, invent the next tool, tell the next story around the fire. Boredom is the ancient engine behind nearly every act of human creativity. Without it, there's a strong chance fire stays undiscovered a little longer. Tools stay simple a little longer. Stories never get told. Boredom isn't a flaw in your biology. It's the discomfort that built civilization, one restless mind at a time. The danger isn't the boredom itself. The danger is what you feed it. When you hand your boredom a screen, it eats motion and stays hungry for meaning. When you hand it nothing, sometimes it turns inward and starts pressing the equivalent of Wilson's shock button, texting an ex, checking a number on a scale, picking at an old wound just to feel something. But when you hand boredom a real challenge, a hard conversation, a half-finished project, a question you've been avoiding, something shifts. The same restless energy that made you twitch in a grocery line becomes the same restless energy that finishes the painting, writes the email, starts the company. You were never built to sit still. You were built to want. So the next time that itch creeps in, the twitch toward your phone, the inexplicable urge to check something you already checked, pause for 1 second before you reach for the easy exit. Ask what your ancestors would have done with that same restless spark. They didn't have screens. They had only the world in front of them, and an old electric kind of discomfort pushing them toward it. That discomfort is still inside you right now. It always has been. You're not bored because something is wrong with you. You're bored because something ancient inside you is still waiting to be pointed somewhere that matters. And tonight, standing in another line, staring at another screen at 2% battery, that ancient alarm